Forget everything you think you know about the 1980s. It wasn't some romantic retro fantasy full of neon lights and funky music. For most people, it was real life without the internet, without endless choices, and without the comforts we take for granted today. Today, we're going to break down exactly how people lived, what they ate, how they raised their kids, and what everyday life actually looked like. No sugarcoating, just the real story. Let's start with where people lived. The vast majority of families lived in simple, standardized apartment blocks. Forget interior designers or custom furniture. You got a place, and that was it. Inside, homes were minimal and incredibly similar. The centerpiece was usually a big wall unit holding books, dishes, and maybe a few trinkets. A sofa that folded out into a bed was common to save space, and you'd often see a carpet hanging on the walnut for decoration. But to block noise from the neighbors and add a layer of insulation against the cold, everything looked the same because choices were extremely limited. You couldn't just go online and order whatever you wanted. You bought what was available. Technology was just as basic. Most homes had a black and white TV with only a few channels. A radio was essential for news and music, and if you were lucky, you had a cassette player. Landline phones were a luxury. Many families didn't have one. Sometimes, a single telephone served an entire staircase of an apartment building, and you'd have to knock on a neighbor's door to make a call. Life moved at a much slower pace, but it also meant there was a lot more face-to-face interaction. You actually knew your neighbors, for better or worse. Now, let's talk about food. The modern foodie would have been horrified. People ate what they could get, and the diet was built on staples. Think potatoes, grains, bread, and pasta. Soups and stews were on the menu constantly because they were a great way to stretch ingredients. Meat was a treat, not an everyday item. Fresh vegetables were only available when they were in season, so people relied heavily on canned goods and pickled vegetables, especially during the long winter months. Every pantry was filled with jars of homemade compota sweet fruit drink made from whatever berries or fruits were harvested in the summer. Sweets were simple, like homemade cakes, and soda was a rare luxury saved for special occasions. It was a diet born out of necessity, not choice. The daily routine was structured around work, but career wasn't really a word people used. You had a job often for life. The work environment was typically slow and bureaucratic. The biggest challenge of daily life was scarcity. You couldn't just pop into a store and buy what you needed. Long queues for basic goods like bread, milk, or toilet paper were a common sight. People spent a significant amount of their free time just waiting in line. So what did they do when they weren't working or queuing? They read. Books were a primary form of entertainment. They listened to the radio and watched the limited programming on TV. It was a life with far fewer distractions. Social life was very different from today. Without social media, communities were real and tangible. Your neighbors weren't just people who lived next door. They were a part of your life. They knew everything about you, which could be both comforting and intrusive. Celebrations were simple, usually held at home with family and friends. A big part of life, especially in the summer, was spent in community gardens or small country plots called duet. Families would go there on weekends to grow their own vegetables, relax, and escape the city. It was a way to supplement their food supply and connect with nature. What about the kids? This is where the 80s seems like another planet. Kids were outside all day, every day, with almost no adult supervision. There were no cell phones, no GPS tracking, no constant check-ins. You left the house in the morning and came back when the streetlights came on or when you heard your mum yelling your name from the balcony. Freedom was absolute. We played tag, hide and seek, and endless ball games. We climbed on metal playground structures that would give a modern parent a heart attack. In the winter, we'd find any icy patch to slide on or go sledding down any nearby hill. Summers were spent at local lakes, exploring the woods, or being shipped off to grandparents in the countryside. It was a childhood of scraped knees, real-world problem-solving, and pure, unadulterated freedom. So, the big question, was life better back then? It's not a simple yes or no. It wasn't better or worse. It was just profoundly different. There was far less comfort, convenience, and choice. Life could be frustrating and drab, but on the other hand, there was a stronger sense of community, more genuine human interaction, and a connection to the real world that is often missing today. People were more resilient and resourceful because they had to be. The 1980s were simple, grounded, and limited in many ways. But it was also real. It was a time that shaped a generation, teaching them patience, community, and how to find joy in the little things. Thanks for joining me on this trip back in time. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history. See you in the next one.